What else?
Your guy last night drives it against Jokic. Jokic makes zero contact with him. LeBron makes the layup. Okay, no foul called. And then he falls to the ground, writhing in pain. The problem, of course, with the faker is that he wasn't sure which arm to grab.
I bet LeBron James drove straight to the basket, finished the layup clean with no whistle at all. Then suddenly he hit the floor like something serious just happened.
A big roll, 16 points. James gets inside for the deuce and he lands awkwardly.
Elbow.
The strange part was how completely unsure he looked about what actually hurt. First he grabbed one arm, then the other, and the entire arena watched the whole thing unfold. Nobody in the building looked convinced, yet somehow this man still expects every call to go his way every single night. So be honest for a second. At this point in his career, is LeBron's flopping just a habit he can't shake? Or is it a calculated move to try and squeeze calls from the refs? Let us know in the comments.
So he goes to the ground, no foul called, but the bucket counted. By the way, they lost to the Nuggets because they always lose to the Nuggets, right?
Nuggets are better.
Yeah, they are better.
Nuggets are better.
And your guy's now writhing on the floor in pain. He grabs his right elbow, and then he's like, maybe it wasn't that one. So then he grabs his left elbow, and then it wasn't that one. So then one of the guys comes over to try to help him up. He yells, "Oh, my elbow!"
Now picture the moment clearly. LeBron James drives toward the basket with Nikola Jokic defending. He gets to the rim and finishes the layup smoothly. But here's the key detail. There was basically no contact from Jokic. Not a bump, not a swipe, not even a light brush, nothing. Naturally, no foul was called because there was nothing to call. But right after the ball drops through the hoop, LeBron, 40 years old, four-time champion, and often mentioned as one of the greatest players to ever touch a basketball, hits the floor and starts reacting like he just took a massive hit. Look, players selling contact isn't new. It has been part of basketball for decades. Some players exaggerate a little to get the referee's attention. Fans complain about it all the time. But what happened next is where things turned almost unbelievably awkward. LeBron reached for his right elbow and held it tight like that was the injury. Then suddenly he seemed to rethink it. Maybe it wasn't the right elbow after all, because a second later he grabbed the left one instead. Now the left elbow is the problem. Except that didn't seem certain either.
I don't know where he got hurt to the point that caused this reaction. I think he faking, bro. I just called it. I called it. He reached for one arm and then reached for the other arm. So he just grabbed both of them. He didn't know which one to play it off with, so he grabbed both of them. Look at him.
And just like that, both arms were suddenly part of this dramatic moment. A teammate rushed over to help him up while LeBron shouted with full commitment, "My elbow." The only question everyone had was simple. Which elbow? Because even he didn't seem totally sure. He gets help to the bench, the training staff checks on him, and the broadcast quickly cuts away while the crowd tries to figure out what they just watched.
And they take him to the bench, and no one's paying him any mind, of course, because everyone knows he's faking.
Nothing.
And then he comes right back on the court like 10 seconds later.
Thank God he's
That was definitely awkward.
about LeBron.
Yo, it's so comical now that he don't even try to hide it. Yo, flopping on the ground like a flounder. Yo, not sure which arm to grab, so he grabs both of them. Does that, can't get up. Oh, my elbow.
But then, about 10 seconds later, seriously, barely 10 seconds, LeBron James jogs right back onto the court looking perfectly fine. The same player who moments earlier was rolling on the hardwood like a fish that jumped out of its tank is suddenly ready to play again. And just to add another twist to the story, the Los Angeles Lakers ended up losing that game to the Denver Nuggets.
Lakers end up the 6th seed, and Denver ends up the 3. Then they get Denver in the first round again. They're going home. They're not beating the Denver Nuggets. I can assure you that. They're not beating the Denver Nuggets. I don't care what anybody says. Okay?
At this point, that matchup has started to feel familiar. Over the past few seasons, the pattern has been pretty clear. Denver wins, not every single time, but often enough that it feels like more than coincidence. The Nuggets have simply looked like the stronger team in many of these games. Nikola Jokic continues to dominate in ways that directly impact winning basketball. The results keep showing up on the scoreboard whenever these two teams meet, but despite all of that, the moment people kept replaying afterward wasn't a big shot or a clutch play. it was the flop. Because eventually these moments stop being isolated incidents and start forming a reputation. And LeBron has built this particular reputation over many years. At this stage of his career, it's basically locked in as part of how people watch his games. When he falls to the floor now, a lot of fans don't react with concern anymore. Their first reaction is skepticism, and moments like this one explain exactly why. A player grabbing one elbow, then the other, yelling about an injury, and then returning to the court seconds later looking completely fine. That's the kind of scene people remember.
This is your king. This is your GOAT. A dude that is so desperate for attention. A dude that is so desperate to be noticed that he pretends to be hurt. He can't get back on defense after a made shot because he fell on his arm and got a boo-boo. And I struggle to say LeBron James got a boo-boo because all he did was softly fall to the ground.
What makes the whole situation even more frustrating for many fans is one simple fact. LeBron doesn't need to do this. This is a player with 4 championships, a player who has dominated the league for 2 decades, a player whose place among basketball's all-time greats is already secure, which makes the flopping moments stand out even more than they normally would. LeBron's legacy is already locked in, the scoring record belongs to him, the assist totals are incredible, and the longevity might be the most impressive part of all. Playing at an elite level this deep into a career is something only a handful of athletes in any sport have ever managed to do. Because of all that, he doesn't need to grab the wrong elbow and shout about it just to be taken seriously. And yet, here we are watching another dramatic fall to the floor. The flopping debate around LeBron isn't new at all. It has followed him through most of his career. His supporters always have a defense ready too. They'll say he's built like a tank and drive straight into contact every night, so sometimes when he hits the floor, it's because the hit was real. Others argue referees don't call enough fouls on him because he's so strong, so he has to exaggerate the contact just to get the whistle. And of course, another common line is simple. Every superstar sells contact, but LeBron gets magnified because he's LeBron. Those arguments make some sense, but none of them really explain a moment like this one, grabbing one elbow, then switching to the other, looking unsure about which arm actually hurts, getting helped off the court like the injury is serious, and then returning to the game almost immediately, before the next TV timeout even arrives. The Rodney Dangerfield comparison people bring up during moments like this actually fits pretty well. At this point, there's almost a comedic vibe to it. The reaction is so dramatic, so committed, and then suddenly it disappears the second it's clear the referee isn't calling anything. The whole thing circles back around from frustrating to almost entertaining, and the timing made it even worse for the Lakers. That flop happened during a game they eventually lost to the Denver Nuggets. So right after the dramatic moment, the scoreboard told the real story. You can't flop your way to a win. The referees didn't fall for it, the points didn't change, and the Nuggets walked away with the victory. Meanwhile, Nikola Jokic, who made absolutely zero contact on that play, just kept doing what he normally does. At this point, he has probably seen this scene enough times that he doesn't even react anymore. While the drama was happening on the floor, Jokic was quietly stacking another win and moving on. In many ways, Jokic represents the total opposite style in this specific situation. He plays a physical, powerful, extremely skilled game, but you almost never see him collapse to the floor, unless someone genuinely knocks him down. He rarely tries to sell fouls, he just keeps playing, and more often than not, he keeps winning, especially against the Lakers. That contrast between the two styles stands out. Jokic sticking to straight basketball while LeBron sometimes leans into a bit of theater, and that difference has been part of the story during the Nuggets' recent success against Los Angeles. Now let's switch gears to something that actually made the NBA look great this week. Because the league deserves credit when something exciting is happening. A rookie named Jane Salaun, and yes, that name is still tripping up plenty of broadcasters, is suddenly leading the race for Rookie of the Year. He was the 6th overall pick in last year's draft out of France. But early in the season, he wasn't getting much attention. Most of the rookie conversation was focused on Cooper Flagg instead. To be fair, Flagg has had a strong first season. Around 16 points and 8 rebounds per game is solid production, especially when you consider the situation he's playing in. He's dealing with limited help around him, and has even battled some early career growing pains. For a 19-year-old to produce numbers like that in the NBA is genuinely impressive, but even with those numbers, he isn't leading the Rookie of the Year race right now. The reason is Siloan, and the biggest reason people are paying attention is what the Charlotte Hornets have suddenly started doing. The Hornets have gone on a run that almost nobody predicted, and honestly very few people can fully explain. They've won multiple games in dominating fashion. That's putting them in rare company for sustained excellence. In fact, only elite teams typically sustain this kind of momentum. Think about that for a second. The Charlotte Hornets are now playing championship-level basketball for stretches, and we're talking about the Hornets here, a franchise that hasn't made the playoffs in what feels like forever, yet suddenly they're putting together stretches of dominance that have the entire league doing a double-take. The Charlotte Hornets, yes, those Hornets, the team whose last real playoff run feels like a trivia question from another era, back when Kemba Walker was still running the show. And now suddenly they're playing exciting basketball again. LaMelo Ball is running the offense like a top-tier point guard, throwing flashy passes and pushing the tempo every night. He's one of the most electric playmakers in the league right now. But the real twist in this story is the rookie changing everything for Charlotte, T-Jane Salan. Salan is bringing a dimension the league is still trying to figure out how to defend. His versatility, shooting range, and basketball IQ are creating problems for opponents every single night. Meanwhile, Brandon Miller deserves serious credit too. In just his second season, he has turned himself into a reliable scoring threat. That kind of jump matters. But the player who has made Charlotte suddenly watchable again, the player who turned them into a team battling for playoff positioning in the Eastern Conference, the player making the Rookie of the Year race feel almost decided, that's Salan. So why was he overlooked earlier in the season? The answer is actually a very familiar NBA media pattern. High draft picks from major programs get the spotlight. The biggest names from the most prestigious backgrounds get the most coverage. Cooper Flagg was a consensus top prospect. Duke developed him, Portland drafted him 4th overall. And before he even played his first professional game, the narrative was already built around him. For the first couple months of the season, everything revolved around Flagg. Meanwhile, Siloan, who came from overseas, was a mid-lottery pick, quietly starting his career in Charlotte. That's a smaller market team that doesn't attract the same national attention as places like Boston or Los Angeles. So while the cameras were locked onto Flagg, Siloan was simply going to work night after night and stacking impressive performances. And honestly, that situation can be perfect for a rookie. Some of the best rookie seasons in NBA history happened away from the spotlight. Away from non-stop debate shows, away from every mistake being replayed and analyzed 5 different ways. In Charlotte, Siloan had space to grow, adjust, and figure things out without the entire sports media machine hovering over him. And he has clearly taken advantage of that opportunity. Now there's another detail people are starting to notice. The broadcasters across the league are still getting comfortable with international names and playing styles. You can hear the excitement building as they call his games, but the name Siloan is about to become very familiar if this Rookie of the Year race keeps trending the way it is. Because when a player's team suddenly becomes competitive and that player is the main reason why, people eventually stop ignoring it. At some point the conversation has to shift, and right now that shift feels very close. Now circle back to LeBron for a moment, because the flopping moment and Siloan's rise actually connect in an interesting way. When you look at the NBA today, you're seeing 2 different generations sharing the stage. On one side, there's LeBron, an all-time legend whose accomplishments are undeniable. 2 decades of elite basketball, championships, records, historic numbers, his legacy is secure. But at the same time, moments like the elbow incident create clips that chip away at the seriousness of those achievements in real time. Then you look at the younger generation rising behind him, players building their reputations in a very different way. Siloan doesn't need to grab both arms and shout about an elbow to get attention. He just plays basketball and lets the results speak loudly. That's a powerful model. Cooper Flagg doesn't rely on selling contact either. Neither does Victor Wembanyama, who is already doing things on a basketball court that barely seem real. When players like that dominate a game, there's no need for dramatic acting or exaggerated reactions. The performance speaks for itself. In many ways, the next wave of NBA stars seems less interested in the theater side of the game and more focused on pure performance. Just play, dominate, and let the highlights happen naturally. LeBron is 40 years old now. He has absolutely earned the right to play the game however he chooses. But the elbow moment, grabbing one arm, then the other, shouting about the injury, and then suddenly jogging back into the game seconds later, is now part of the record. Clips like that don't disappear. They end up in highlight compilations, debates, and endless online discussions. That's why 2 different nicknames continue to follow him. King James represents the greatness he built over 20 years of elite basketball. But another reputation pops up during moments like Tuesday night against the Nuggets, because in that game he made a layup, fell to the floor with no clear contact, grabbed the wrong arm, switched to the other arm, shouted about his elbow, and then returned to the court about 10 seconds later, like nothing had happened. The NBA contains a lot of different stories at once, and LeBron James, after such a long career, contains a lot of different moments too. Legendary achievements, unforgettable highlights, and occasionally some very dramatic falls to the floor. And apparently in that moment against Denver, both elbows had exactly the same level of injury, which is to say, none at all. And here's the bigger question that keeps popping up after moments like this. At what point does flopping stop being a small part of the game and start becoming part of a player's identity? Because with LeBron, this conversation has followed him for years, not every game, not every play, but enough times that fans instantly recognize the pattern when it happens again. The dramatic fall, the reaction, the quick glance toward the referee to see if the whistle is coming when it doesn't. Suddenly, the injury doesn't look quite as serious anymore. That's exactly why the elbow moment spread so fast online. Fans replayed it over and over because it had everything: the layup, the fall, the confusion about which arm was actually hurt. First the right elbow, then the left elbow, and then the shout of "my elbow," while everyone watching tried to figure out which one he meant. And the strangest part of the whole situation, the recovery. One moment he's on the floor looking like the pain is unbearable. The next moment he's jogging back onto the court ready to play again. 10 seconds later, it's like the entire incident never happened. Moments like that create a strange reaction from fans. Some people laugh because it looks ridiculous. Others get frustrated because they feel like the game shouldn't look like that. Basketball is supposed to be about skill, strength, and competition, not dramatic acting on the hardwood. The league itself has tried to deal with flopping before. The NBA has handed out warnings and even fines for players who clearly exaggerate contact. But the reality is that it still happens all the time because players believe it helps them get calls. If referees react to it even once in a while, players are going to keep trying it. And to be fair, LeBron is far from the only player who has done it. Plenty of stars across the league have had their own flopping moments caught on camera. But when you're one of the most famous athletes on the planet, every single moment gets amplified. Every clip gets replayed. Every reaction spreads across social media within minutes. That's the price of being LeBron James. The spotlight is always on him. Every great play becomes a highlight, and every awkward moment becomes a meme. But here's the twist in this whole situation. Even with the flopping jokes, the dramatic reactions, and the constant debates about his style of play, LeBron is still producing at an unbelievable level for someone in year 22 of an NBA career. Most players are retired long before reaching this point. Others are barely hanging on to a roster spot. Meanwhile, LeBron is still putting up big numbers, still running the offense, and still competing against players nearly half his age. That's what makes the conversation around him so strange. On one hand, you have one of the greatest careers in sports history. On the other hand, you occasionally get moments that make fans raise their eyebrows and ask, did that really just happen? And the truth is, both things can exist at the same time. The legendary achievements and the dramatic reactions. The historic records and the viral flopping clips. That's part of what makes the NBA so entertaining. It's not just about the scores and statistics, it's also about the personalities, the rivalries, the strange moments that everyone ends up talking about the next day. Because sometimes a game produces a buzzer beater. Sometimes it produces a breakout performance from a rookie like Salan, and sometimes it produces a moment where one of the greatest players ever grabs the wrong elbow. Then the other elbow shouts about it and runs back into the game seconds later like nothing happened. At the end of the day, moments like the elbow incident are exactly why LeBron James continues to be one of the most talked about athletes on the planet. When you've been in the spotlight for more than 20 years, every single action gets examined, replayed, and debated from every possible angle. The incredible achievements, the championships, the records, the historic longevity, and yes, even the dramatic moments on the floor. That's the strange reality of being a global sports icon. The greatness brings admiration, but the small moments bring endless discussion, and LeBron has experienced both sides of that spotlight throughout his career. But while fans debate flopping clips and slow-motion replays, the NBA itself keeps moving forward. New stars are rising, new rivalries are forming, and young players like Tidjane Salawan are beginning to build their own stories in the league. Every season adds another chapter. Veterans trying to extend legendary careers, rookies trying to prove they belong, and teams battling for position every single night. And that's what keeps the league so interesting. One night, the conversation is about a rookie dominating games and shocking the league. The next night, everyone is replaying a strange moment involving one of basketball's biggest legends. The NBA always finds a way to deliver something people can't stop talking about. So now we want to hear from you. Do you think LeBron's flopping moments are just part of the modern game? Or do you think a player with his legacy should leave that stuff behind completely? And what about the Rookie of the Year race? Does Salawin already have it locked up, or can Cooper Flagg still make a late push? Drop your thoughts down in the comments because we read them all, and the debates in there are always wild. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who loves talking NBA drama and basketball debates. It really helps the channel grow and keeps more videos like this coming. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.